Hello, and welcome to Amplifying the Voices of African Researchers, a podcast series by the Climate and Development Knowledge Network Africa, where we spotlight emerging science evidence, highlight local knowledge, and amplify African-led research shaping climate action across the continent. This early career fellowship is supported by the International Development Research Center and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. Thanks for making our podcast part of your routine. I'm your host, Herein, and in each episode, we sit down with experts, especially early career researchers, who are shaping Africa's climate future through groundbreaking and policy-relevant research. Welcome to today's segment where we spotlight the intersection of culture and climate action. Our focus is a compelling study conducted in Western Kenya that unveils the power of indigenous communication media, ICM, in strengthening climate change and mitigation and adaptation. From oral narratives to taboos to totems, these traditional forms of messaging tap into local traditional wisdom, making climate communication more relatable and actionable. We'll explore how community knowledge systems are shaping policy strategies and advancing inclusive resilience and fostering relationships all across the continent. And today's episode is we are joined by our seasoned researcher from Kenya, Lucy Mandillah, who is going to tell us all about how to communicate climate action to make it personable and relatable to indigenous communities. Welcome, Lucy. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone. My name is Lucy Mandillah. I'm a senior lecturer at Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, Kenya. I'm also in charge of the Institute of Indigenous Knowledge, Cultural Studies and Climate Change at the university. I have a PhD in applied linguistics, but my area of research specialty is cultural linguistics and communication. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
We are also glad that you are spending so much, you're spending your time, you're sharing your knowledge with us, and we cannot wait to see what you have for us. Dr. Lucy, could you just let us go straight to the point because today is quite exciting. I am so interested in indigenous knowledge, and I believe that other young researchers and listeners listening all across the continent would also be much interested in what you have to share with us today. So, could you tell us more about your research?
Okay, thank you very much. My research topic is indigenous communication media for promoting climate change mitigation and adaptation in Western Kenya. I actually conducted this study last year between March and May among selected communities in Western Kenya. And the study essentially explores how indigenous communication media, which is otherwise called indigenous media. Some scholars call it traditional media, others call it oral media, others call it informal media. How these kind of media can be used, can be integrated with modern communication media like when you talk about modern communication media, we are talking about the Western approaches to communication, like mass media, social media, and all that. But traditional media or indigenous media are the kind of media or the ways of communicating that is embedded in our African culture. So this study explores how we can integrate the two media, the indigenous communication media and the modern communication media for climate action, because you realize that there is actually a gap when it comes to communication, a gap in terms of access. A majority of people stay in rural areas. I could say they are illiterate in quotes, so they are not accessible to the kind of the 21st century communication media that is being used. So how do we access these particular people? We can do it through indigenous communication media, which comes in form of proverbs, songs, storytelling, taboos, rituals that come in the local languages. And you realize that this kind of communication fills a critical gap in climate communication by catering for indigenous voices and knowledge systems. They'll feel part and parcel of the climate action and all that. So maybe if I could go to the key findings, I sampled 4 communities. There is a county in Kenya called Busia County, and in Busia County there's a place called Budalangi, which is always rampant with floods. Every year there are floods in that particular community. So when I visited them, actually, they pointed out that they always rely heavily on the FM radio station that is called Bulala. Bulala in English can loosely be translated as oneness, which broadcasts in the local vernacular radio. And they also rely on the chiefs barazas. Chiefs barazas are community gatherings that are led by community gatekeepers or community leaders to disseminate climate information. So actually the respondents pointed out that Olunyala is the local language of the community. They embrace it so much because it enhances relevance and comprehension, which fosters trust, identity, and even participation in the traditional climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. I also sampled out some communities which live within and around the Kakamega tropical rainforest. That is the only tropical rainforest that is still remaining. And these are the Kabaras community, the Isuha, and the Tsotso community. Actually, the respondents pointed out that they use traditional communication media like proverbs, songs, totems, and taboos for environmental sustainability. If I could just point out one of the proverbs I've translated into English that they used, treat the tree well. It was not given to you by your parents. Such a proverb conveys environmental stewardship and it encourages sustainable behavior, and especially if it is disseminated or articulated in the local language. Well, we had a traditional song that advocated for the planting and conservation of trees among the Isuha. Actually, it emphasized the role of trees in rainmaking, air purification, and biodiversity. We had also an array of totems and taboos. Actually, totems and taboos come in form of the do's and don'ts. Some of these communities, they have plants, they have animals, they have insects that are spiritual to them. So harming them or even destroying such plants, it is believed that there's something bad, a curse would happen or occur to the person who is destroying that particular plant in that forest, or the person who is destroying that particular animal. So by those, they hold reverence for certain animals like the eagle and the forest antelope. And such taboos, the do's and don'ts, actually instill respect for biodiversity and discourage deforestation through cultural and spiritual values. There are many, many more examples that I've given in the manuscript, but I conclude by saying that indigenous media effectively translates complex climate science into culturally resonant messages, particularly in contexts of limited literacy and media access, like the rural Western Kenya. So integrating indigenous communication media with the modern media like mass and digital media can enhance grassroots engagement, strengthen community resilience, and support inclusive climate action, which is aligned to SDG 13 and Africa's Agenda 2023. So my study actually recommends a hybrid climate communication model, which combines both indigenous and modern methods to bridge the communication gap and empower local communities in climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. Thank you very much.
That's so
Back to you.
wonderful, Dr. Lucy. So, I'd like to know in your field work across Kakamega, which indigenous communication techniques stood out, particularly if, as effective in mobilizing grassroots climate action?
Yeah, the one that really stood out were the taboos and totems, the do's and don'ts. Certain a tree, you are not supposed to cut it. If you cut it down, maybe this and that will happen to you. Your generation will perish and all that. So actually, like you go into the forest, there were lots of taboos and rituals associated with the forest and all that. So it really, really stood out that most of whatever happens within the biodiversity comes out in form of the do's and don'ts among members of the community. So if such do's and don'ts are actually communicated now through social media, even those, it can also be accessible to the people who are outside that particular context, and actually it will promote climate action.
So, Dr. Lucy, would you attribute the rampant use or the observation of these taboos and totems to the reason why Kakamega is the only tropical rainforest that is left in Western Kenya? Could that also be a contributing factor?
Yeah, it could be a contributing factor because the members of the communities who live around the forest, they believe in these taboos, they believe in these rituals, and actually there are some plants and some animals which are never destroyed because these communities actually really uphold to the spirituality. They really attach some spirituality around such animals, insects, and plants within the forest. So
Great.
partly, I would say majorly, yes.
Great. You have given us a very extensive presentation on ICM. How do indigenous languages enhance the clarity and impact of climate messaging compared to conventional communication channels?
Wow, interesting. Indigenous languages. That aspect, when you communicate in your mother tongue, if you communicate in your native language, there is that aspect of identity that that someone feels. Yeah, so it's like there's an obligation that you feel this is my language, and the way it is being communicated, it's at home, it's more clearer, and the interlocutors end up adhering to whatever they are communicating to because they feel it is part and parcel of them. It's not something that is coming out. So actually, the use of indigenous languages in communicating climate action is very, very, very crucial in terms of adaptation and mitigation measures.
Great. So, given the urgency of the climate crisis, how can policymakers radically integrate indigenous communication media into national adaptation frameworks without compromising cultural integrity?
Okay, we have issues of ethics, research ethics, and when it comes to research ethics, we have the culture of community is also very important. So once the policy makers put in place or put in measures the protection of our people's culture and all that, I think it's something that is doable.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So Can you share with us any example of a taboo or totem that has successfully guided sustainable practices in these communities that you studied?
Yeah, so the this tree is called Omurembe among the Cabras. There's a taboo that tree is not supposed to be cut down. It's not supposed to be used for firewood whatsoever. And the repercussion is, in case you cut down that tree, you do what? You die, or your generation perishes. So, but that tree, it has medicinal value. It has spiritual value. It has some spiritual values. That, like for example, if someone has mumps, it is believed that you go to that tree, you pick some sticks and some leaves around that tree, then you do some chants, like virarai, virarai, wera humrembe. So mumps, mumps, mumps. Can you go back to the tree? Then you throw those sticks and leaves, then you run away, you don't look back. When you reach home, you'll be healed. So that tree is never, it's usually, it's rare, and it's always within secluded places like forests. So no one dares even to use it to cook. So they say in case you cut it down for firewood, when you use it to cook, that food will never cook. It will cook forever, and your generation will perish. So people never cut down that tree. So I imagine that because actually that tree is a rare species, maybe they came up with such taboos so that they can preserve it. Because actually it's very rare to find it and all that. That's just one example of a tree that is held, it's medicinal, it is spiritual and all that, and there are some taboos and rituals that are associated with it. And there are many more examples I would give.
This is by far my favorite segment. I love to hear about all these uniqueness from our African communities, and you can do agree with me that our ancestors are really knowledgeable and they have a way of protecting biodiversity and also trying to control climate change. So, Dr. Mandela, could you let us know what the challenges are during the course of your studies? Did you encounter any challenges in particular?
Yeah, lots of challenges. One of the main challenges is now members of the community feel some of this knowledge is primitive, it's archaic, and they feel what is Western is the best. Yeah, another challenge is the custodians of this knowledge. Like I was doing some interviews, focus group discussions, and I realized that just finding the people who are knowledgeable with this traditional knowledge is a problem. It's like death. They are really dying at a very fast rate and all that, and that calls upon us to do a lot of what documentation actually, because we are losing the real custodians of this knowledge. Another main issue challenge I faced is just the taboos again associated with this traditional knowledge. There is some knowledge that is held so reverent around these communities, and they don't want to reveal it to, I would say, a stranger in quotes. So you really have to convince them that you are going to use it for research purpose and not for any other purpose and all that. So a lot of secrecy around this African indigenous knowledge. Yeah, then I would do more, but I think it was just a case study. I wanted just to publish something, but I believe with more resources, we can do a lot and document more. So just limited funds, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now that we've seen the limitations from the perspective of a researcher, your perspective, and also with these people who are keeping information to themselves, some also debunking the effectiveness of our indigenous knowledge. What are the limitations? So now we come to a neutral ground. What are the limitations of relying solely on indigenous communication media for climate action, and how can these limitations be mitigated?
Yeah, actually, there's we cannot solely rely on indigenous communication media. Just as I've pointed out, we have some aspects of members of the community. We have different generations, and because of westernization, we have some generation or some people who don't embrace it. And that is why I said that I was recommending the integration. So when we integrate the new models, then each and every person will pick what suits him or her. Like for example, if we use these proverbs and totems on social media handles, Instagram, and translate in English, French, and all that. The Gen Zs maybe would look at it, read the English version, because they are techno savvy, so they'll easily go on Facebook, on eggs and all that. So when they get there, they'll find this proverb there, but this proverb has been translated into English. I'm sure they'll be able to consume it and it can make sense. When you go back to the village, the same proverb is being broadcasted in a vernacular FM radio station. So that old man or that old woman who's listening to that Bulala FM radio station will be able to listen, and comprehend this particular proverb that is telling him or her maybe to preserve some tree or something in the forest in that local language. And each and every person, the Gen Z and these maybe the baby boomer and all that, will consume the same information, but with a with a difference in terms of what of the attachment. I would say the attachment to that particular information, depending on the media or the channel that has been used.
I love how you have just balanced the integration of modern scientific knowledge with traditional ecological wisdom, and also leveraging technology to amplify the reach and the impact of indigenous communication media without diluting its essence. I really love that about you. Now, Doc, how do we measure the effectiveness of indigenous communication media in climate, like to achieve tangible climate adaptation outcomes? How do you measure the effectiveness of indigenous communication media in achieving tangible climate adaptation outcomes?
Yeah, measuring the efficacy. How do we do that? And earlier on, you just pointed out that could it be the reason why Kakamega tropical rainforest, it's the only remaining tropical rainforest, can it be attributed to the to the taboos, the rituals, let me say the traditional media that are being used around that? I would say yes or no. And that could be used as one of the ways of measuring the what? The effectiveness. So through maybe we could say a study, a baseline survey, getting to know where people still embrace. Like in Kenya, we are able to tell where people still embrace traditional communication media. The communities that still embrace that, like the Maasais, we have the Tirikis and all that. So we could just do an experiment with the communities that have really embraced the modern communication media, or say the Western approaches, and the communities that are still within that traditional whatever mode of communication, and try to see their ecosystems and compare which one still maintains the ecosystem and which one doesn't, and why. Maybe through that we can be able to measure the efficacy.
Yeah, Dr. Mandela, in your experience, according to your expertise, are there any specific cultural practices or beliefs that have hindered climate adaptation efforts? And if there are any, how can these be addressed constructively? Because we want to really preserve, the indigenous knowledge.
Yeah, there are cultural practices that hinder There are those that promote, and I would say maybe cultural practices are a double-edged sword. There are those that promote, and there are those that hinder. So what we need to do is to strike a balance, pick the best practices, and leave behind those that are not promoting, or try to see how we can mitigate those that are not promoting.
Thank you very much for that. So, Dr. Mandela, what is your vision for the future of indigenous communication media in global climate action efforts?
Yes, I feel we cannot run away from indigenous communication media when it comes to the climate action efforts. We have no choice other than to go back to our roots, because there is a lot we can learn. There is a lot we can tap into. Uh, our cultures, our traditions, and all that in terms of what? Adaptation. So the future is bright. Let us just go back to our roots and see what our ancestors were doing, and pick the best practices and move forward with them. Thank you.
Indeed, and has been a wonderful statement with our Indigenous communication expert, Dr. Lucy Mandela from Kenya. And she has provided us with explicit and profound knowledge on how Indigenous communication media offers more than traditional knowledge. It provides culturally anchored pathways for climate adaptation. As seen in Western Kenya, I wish I could visit Kakamega one day.
Most
Practices like
welcome.
Practices like storytelling, taboos, and totems don't just inform, they inspire community, they drive resilience, and harnessing this wisdom is key to crafting climate strategies that are inclusive, trusted, and sustainable. And going forward, the integration of indigenous methods with modern climate policy could redefine the way we build resilient futures. Dr. Lucy, it has been such a pleasure, and thanks so much for, throwing more light. It's been so amazing. It's been very intriguing hearing all of these things and how our ancestors and people today are able to preserve, sacred species, we're able to preserve the environment using all of these stuff. Do you have any last words for us?
Just my parting shot is, let us not run away from our culture. Let us embrace it and make use of it to mitigate against climate change impacts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lucy Mandela. It's been such a delight. Continue to work on, and I hope that as you continue to embark on more research, you will be able to share your findings with us and also try to see how we could integrate your findings with the policies that we have today to better our society and also have a safer and a cleaner environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's conversation has illuminated the profound influence of Indigenous communication media in catalyzing climate resilience, from oral storytelling to totems and taboos that quietly guide environmental stewardship. What we've seen in Western Kenya isn't just regional insights, it is a call to rethink how cultural heritage can inform national climate strategies as we strive for adaptation, solutions that are inclusive, effective, and locally grounded. We must honor the voices that have been echoing sustainability for generations. The path forward isn't just innovation, it is about integration. If you'd love to hear more about our researchers, join the CDKN Africa Fellowship. And you can go on our website at cdkn.org and learn more about Dr. Mandela and her research and how we are amplifying the voices of early career researchers. Thank you so much, and until next time, make
Thank
a
you.
date with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Mandillah. This podcast is part of the CDKN Africa Fellowship, working to elevate African voices in climate science, policy, and practice. Until next time, think locally led research, publish widely, and let Africa's researchers' voice echo in every local and global climate conversation.